I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please take roll.
Roll call ready? Commissioner SLAWINSKI,
Here.
Commissioner Szymanski,
present.
Commissioner Memberto,
Here.
Commissioner Weiner,
Here.
Commissioner McBride, Commissioner Yoder, Chair Whitliff.
Here. Thank you. Approval of agenda. At this time, the Planning Commission can take action to approve the June 4th, 2020 meeting agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion. Mick Szymanski.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Bob. Any discussion? None. Please take roll.
Okay. Commissioner SLAWINSKI,
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski,
Yes.
Commissioner Memberto,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiner,
Yes.
Chair Whitliff.
Yes. Thank you. This time the Planning Commission can, at this time the Planning Commission can approve the May 7th, 2020 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I'll motion that.
Motion
Second.
by Bob, second
By Szymanski.
by Mick. Any discussion? None. Please take roll.
Commissioner SLAWINSKI,
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski,
Yes.
Commissioner Memberto,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiner,
Yes.
Chair Whitliff.
Yes. Thank you. Public hearings, we have none tonight. Public comment on agenda related items. Before I open that up, I just want to read this. All public handouts from the speaker will go to the podium, even though we're not meeting face to face. We'll go through the chair. Also, there will be no interaction between the podium and audience. These rules cannot be followed. The chair can't terminate this portion of the meeting. So if anybody in the public would like to speak on gender-related items, you have up to 5 minutes. Name and address, please.
All right, so we have one member of the public here. I'll ask if they have a comment. Tom, do you have a comment on agenda?
Yes, I do. I have a comment. Yep. Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah, just identify yourself by address and who you
Okay,
are.
my name is Tom Amore. I live at 432 4th Street in Manistee, and I'm representing Amore Sign Studios to talk about the model sign ordinance. I submitted a letter. I hope that Mark got a copy of it. And I'd like that entered into the minutes, and I'm going to read that now. I just have some concerns about the model ordinance that has been submitted. I wasn't able to zoom in at the last meeting. I tried to get this letter into the last meeting, but I have some concerns. So I'll just start by reading this letter. I addressed it to City Manager Thad Taylor. And dear Thad, I read through Mike Jacola's memo to the Planning Commission that was included in the agenda packet for tonight's Zoom meeting, and I have some concerns. First is the model ordinance he submitted was introduced to me as the APA model ordinance. It turns out that that ordinance is not the APA ordinance. It's a Montgomery County Planning Commission ordinance from the East Coast, and that's Pennsylvania. Mike also said in his memo to the Planning Commission that the APA and the ISA jointly developed it, and that's not true. Second, he referenced key things that Kyle Story found lacking in our ordinance. One was an incomplete list of definitions, and the other was a planning commission desire to move away from pole signs. I disagree that these are the primary triggers for rewriting the sign ordinance. My memory says that the trigger was a disagreement on how to measure allowable square footage. We met for 2 hours in a work session in an attempt to work together towards a workable sign ordinance. The county planning office determined less than 15 minutes after that meeting that they didn't have the resources to spend working towards an agreeable sign ordinance. I do agree with Mike. There are other considerations. Many of those questions he listed in the memo to the previous month's meeting, the May meeting, were questions that came up in our work session. Those questions really do need to be answered either by the Planning Commission or in a community work session. I would strongly urge that the Planning Commission not adopt the Montgomery County Planning Commission ordinance as a model ordinance. If you were to approve an existing model ordinance without community input, I strongly recommend again the Signage Research Foundation model sign code that I presented in 2 previous Planning Commission meetings. It truly is a blend of APA, SRF, which is Signage Research Foundation, and ISA, International Sign Association, that was evidence-based and moderated by the University of Cincinnati. And sincerely, Tom Amore. I'm not sure how far you got into the sign ordinance talk at the last meeting. I read the minutes. I'm not sure if that model ordinance is the one that's going to be the starting point. And if so, it's 64 pages long. I need time to digest and make recommendations. And I still think a work session is the way to do it. And maybe the city council needs to direct the planning commission or direct the county administrator that's going to oversee the zoning administration in the city to allocate resources to doing that, because without community input or business input, it's going to be a disaster down the road. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else? None? Okay, no other public comment? Okay, we'll move along into new business. New business is a memo regarding direction and updates from City Council, fences, patios, site plan review committee. And before we get going, I don't know if Mr. Amore received a copy of the letter that was sent last week, actually on May 11th to the city manager. And I can read this if the commission would like me to. Commissioners?
What memo is this that you were?
This
Is
is
it something that we got in
dated-
our package?
Yes, this is in the packet dated
Okay.
5/11/2020. It's
Yep.
addressed to the city manager.
I think we all got one. I've read it already, so
Okay,
it's up to the other members if whether or not they want you to read it into record or not.
okay, Shelly?
I read it.
Okay, Bob?
Yep, I read it.
Okay. And I'm sorry, who else is in there?
I am Pam.
Okay, I'm sorry, Pam.
I
You're not
read
sitting next to me, so I don't know.
it.
Usually you give me a tap on the head and like, you do that.
Or a kick under the table.
Well, that too. But we all have it, and it's up on the board. And I just want to make a comment about this. about a few days after this, would have been on the 15th, somewhere in there, I called the city manager to discuss this letter and what we wanted, updates from DPW or the city manager, and direction from city council. And the response I received from the city manager is just very disappointing, and I'm really upset about it. He stated to me, this is a lot of work to send out an update, which is kind of ridiculous to me.
Don't
He
they
is
take notes?
Yes, please. He is getting paid to do this, to perform his job, in which I haven't received any updates from the city manager, and I don't know if anybody on the commission has seen an update of what's going on, the street work. He stated to me that he would have Rob or Mike do the updates, which I refused. I told him that is not their job to update us with city functions. Is his job to do that. And then he says, well, maybe I will have Mick Szymanski do it. And I referred it to being, no, that is not Mick's job to update us. It is his job. And I did reach out to several city council members, and they gave me their support to have this done. So, Mick, I didn't get a chance to talk to you, but I can talk to you later about it. I guess you know my feelings now.
Yep.
That the city manager, should get off the pot and do his job.
Yeah. When I talked, this is Mick Szymanski.
Yes.
When I talked to the city manager, I basically asked him to send out his weekly updates and just redact anything that was not pertinent to the planning commission. And I don't know that that would be that much work. I mean, there are things that are, that are sent to the city council that would not necessarily be appropriate for the planning commission. But again, he would be able to redact those pieces and then send it off, at least to you. He doesn't necessarily have to send it, but I would think that he needs to send it to Rob and yourself, and then you can disseminate it to the rest of the planning commission as appropriate.
I send out updates to our team members at Thoroughbred Boat Company every day. It's not that hard. It takes me about 2 minutes to do it. I created a team file. You hit team, boom, done. Do whatever you need to do on it. I did receive a update from one of the council members. I'm not going to say who, but it was a forwarded email from the city manager, from the Spicer Group. That's all I'm asking for. Yep. And he doesn't want to do it. So I guess the next step is to I will kind of email and copy all the city council members on this. So I'm not going to let it go, because I think it's kind of ridiculous that we cannot get that information. We are serving the community. We're doing our best for the city, and we're not updated to what's going on. So that's it. Before I rant anymore, let's move along. So
one thing on that, Mark. With that memo he sends out to the council, he's already written it. All he's got to do is delete paragraphs out of what we don't need and just substitute the who to send it to. That's a cut and paste real quick. We do that. We've done it at work time and time again, the different groups in the school. And it's just a click of a mouse.
Right. Exactly. And it's again, he's not doing it. Probably his secretary is. So it's not that hard. So, okay, let's move along. I'm gonna turn this over to Mike, and we will go down the agenda here to fences.
All right, so moving through in administering the zoning ordinance, since I've kind of started to get my hands into it, I've noticed some issues with things not being in the zoning ordinance or not being referenced that are in existence. One of these being fences. So if you guys look at your packets there, and I will put it up here briefly for Tom, our public here, and just give me a second to share it out.
Me, sorry.
And there we go. So as you see, as of June 16th, 2017, you guys no longer require permits for fencing. And you still need to comply with the ordinance, which is good. But certain things on here are not included in it, such as that it's actually exempt. So not that I didn't know, a quick Google search will bring this up, but it does need to be in the ordinance under exemptions. So I think I make that requirement. As you can see here, it has everything in here as far as, you know, what might be needed to be in there, but there is an exempt area in there within your ordinance that we will talk about on patios as well. And if you guys don't have anything or don't wish to speak on this, I can jump right to that and show you the area that I'm thinking about adding this to.
Okay. I do have a comment on the fence ordinance.
Mhm.
I think there needs to be an area that addresses when a fence is placed on a property line and that property line impedes access to the adjoining property. There's an instance of that, at least one. Again, we're an old town and we have a lot of, you know, interesting situations, but we had a fence built and the property line was designed so that the garage of the adjoining property is abutted up against the neighbor's fence.
I live in a house like that.
So that's a foul. I'm sorry. I think when a new fence is, you know, obviously, you know, we may not be able to address this, but this fence that was put up makes it impossible for the homeowner that lives next door to get to his house. He couldn't even paint his house without having the fence taken down.
I know which house you're talking about, Mick.
Yeah, it's on Walnut Street.
Yep.
So we have to have something in the ordinance that a fence cannot be placed, even if the property limits allow it. A fence cannot be placed in such a way as to impede the access to the physical structure of an adjoining property. Does that make sense to everyone else?
That makes
Yeah, it does.
perfect sense.
I can't get to one side of my carriage house because my neighbor has a fence that goes along the back and there's no way to get over it without
Right.
going and asking if I can.
I mean, we're only asking for the fence to be, you know, again, it's not saying, you know, that you don't own the property, but
Right.
but at least, you know, give the guy a foot or two break so that he can get around. I mean,
Yeah.
that, to me, it should have been a courtesy, but obviously that is not. So we should be put something in our fence ordinance that does not perpetuate what has already happened at least twice now that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I see that a lot in the surveying, and a lot of it comes down to a pissing match between the original landowners that are there and the current landowners that take over after are stuck with an existing fence that's there.
Yep.
And it gets kind of hard to force somebody to move a fence when it's been there for a long time because it's on their property. You're violating their rights to property ownership by doing that.
Yeah. Thankfully, I have good neighbors. So.
No, because I've seen it many, many times I lost track of how many times I've dealt with fence lines being right on the property line or just inches away from it, and the next door neighbor just screams and hollers, I don't have room.
And I believe that that's what this ordinance says. It's got to be inside the property line, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is that inside the property line, but you can't build a fence if it is going to impede a adjoining property owner from accessing his physical property, which in this case, you literally you can't get to the other side of this person's house.
Yes, you
Because that
can. I know
fence
you
is
can. You can walk
literally
around it.
is literally the other person's, and again, obviously things change, but when that house was built, it was built where it was almost right on the other person's property line.
Yeah, I would think we'd have to be careful about the language. I'm thinking specifically of the way that my house was probably the first one on the block. I know my neighbor's house is probably a good 40 years younger. And it's my carriage house that's affected by the fence. So I would think we would take care to even be specific about outbuildings or sheds or things like that.
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't want somebody to have to move their fence back 2 feet because somebody decided to put up a shed. So I would think that we would
Correct,
have to.
but it would be the other way around. What I'm saying is that the property owner can't build a fence next to an existing property. If afterwards you want to build a shed and that person's fence is on the property line, that's your problem.
Right, I
What I'm
agree with
saying
that.
is that a new fence can't be constructed in such a way as to impede somebody from actually painting the side of their building.
Yeah,
Now you start putting that in where you're telling the people where they have to put their fences like that, you're going to start bringing up a lot of legal adverse possession issues, which gets pretty sticky down the road. So
Yep.
you're talking at lawyer costs coming in.
I
I've
would,
had to
I
deal with
would
that many
see if there's
times.
any, yeah, I would say, the idea in theory, I mean, like I said, it applies to me, so I get it, but I would like to seek, maybe a legal opinion or some
Right.
precedents.
So we could have something that says that, a fence cannot be constructed against within 3 feet of a neighbor's existing structure.
But then you've got the existing structure violating the setbacks on that side,
Well, but again, in this
which would be the
point,
same deal.
but again, these setbacks, again, we're grandfathered.
Yeah, they're grandfathered.
Mhm.
My house is 140 years old, so they.
Yeah, I mean, so, again, these are all I'm only talking about new fences where, not where, if somebody is obviously in violation of the code when they built, that's not the issue. It's literally this home and this fence was built after, and knowing well that they were building this fence on the property line that basically cut off that person from literally being able to paint the side of their building.
Hmm.
And again, I'm only saying this is something that I would ask the planning staff to look at to see if there is anything where we can say that a new fence, cannot be constructed within, 3 feet of an existing facility that was already, literally that's already in compliance with zoning ordinances.
I think you have to be very careful on it with because you're basically saying my non-conforming structure takes precedence over your.
But these are not non-conforming structures.
Yes,
Well,
they are, because
Yep.
they've been there, so they're non-conform. They fall under non-conforming, even though they've been built years and years ago.
Oh, okay. But there should be some kind of a grandfather rule so that you don't have this kind of literally vindictive process.
Yeah, I think where
taking
it becomes an issue is when you have challenges between neighbors. Like me, I could just, say to my neighbor, hey, I'm having my carriage house painted. Do you mind? There's going to be guys in your yard for a couple days. They wouldn't have any issue.
Well, in this case, they would have to tear down the fence. It's not a matter of being in the other person's
Oh, so they
yard.
actually put up a fence.
I fit
They
between that
put
fence.
up a solid fence next to this person's garage that is
Mick, I
almost
fit between that
touching
fence.
eaves.
I did the survey there. I fit between the fence and that building. I can fit between there. I know
Could
exactly
you-
the house you're talking about.
Okay,
So I did the property survey on that, and I retraced the original survey. And that house got built long after the original survey got done, and built over the setbacks that they didn't pay attention at the time. And where the fence is, I was able to slip between the building and the fence.
okay.
So there is physically room to get there on that one, in that instance. There are other instances I know there's not room, but the one you're talking about, I know that one personally.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there-
I would
there's-
just ask them, just ask in a legal perspective, is there something when we're allowing people to build a fence that we don't create a public disturbance at the same time?
What is the feelings of the commission on that? A lot of things going on, so
I think we need to talk to George on that when you get into opinion on that from
Yeah.
a legal standpoint on that. I think he's going to cause a lot of adverse possession problems because down the line, people are saying, well, your fence is here. Our property goes to your fence, not over here. I've seen that time and time again.
what is the feeling of everybody? To send it to George?
Yeah, I'd like a legal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
I would as well, yes.
All right, very good. Then we will move on to send it off to the city attorney for his determination. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay,
Yes.
so back to this not being in the ordinance. So this kind of went in with patios. So I penned you guys a letter. I'm going to put it on screen.
Hey, Mike, I do have a couple things on the fence, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I thought we had this out before, but a setback from the sidewalk, is there such a thing for a fence ordinance?
On the front, it's from your parcel line. It's 15 feet, unless it's a decorative fence. And then you guys have where you've made wrought iron fences and the decorative fences. It's on maple, the white ones in the corners. You've allowed those types.
Yeah.
But they have to be what's considered decorative, which is a little bit, it's a little bit, I would like to see a more solid definition of decorative, if I'm honest. Because all you're basically saying is they have to be 50%, see-through essentially, or opaque.
I would think so. I would think something other than a privacy fence, anything other than a privacy fence would probably cover a lot of that.
But you gotta be careful, because what about chain link fences? I mean,
That's a private, that's not blocking privacy. That's just marking a line. You could physically see through it on a chain link fence.
right, but do you consider those?
But do you
decorative?
want to have that on the sidewalk?
You're not going to be on the sidewalk. You're going to be on the property line.
Well,
No.
but what I'm saying is literally right next, you could literally be right next to the sidewalk.
And
Yes, because that's where the property line is.
there-
You're
I thought
protecting
we
your
had a-
property.
I thought we had a setback from the sidewalk due to the city plows on the sidewalk.
The sidewalks are in the city property, most of them are. And then
Right.
the property lines are usually on the inside of the sidewalk toward the building.
Right.
Very
so
rare instances that the property line is in the sidewalk where they put an old sidewalk in.
to give you perspective on it, there's a house on 4th Street, I believe it is. And it's right across from the courthouse. They were putting in a privacy fence. They brought it all the way up to the property line, right on the front side of the sidewalk there. And it's not a decorative fence. It's not see-through. They had to bring it back 15 feet.
Yep.
And that's where it stands now. But that was one that this applied to. So,
Yeah, that makes sense there. If they went to like maybe a 3-foot privacy fence or something where you can physically see over it and it's not blocking view for down the streets and stuff. You know, that's where, same thing like a decorative fence there, those wrought iron ones. They're not blocking.
it seems like you guys would like to look at the fence portion of the ordinance maybe a little more. What I really wanted to point out was that it's not in the ordinance that they're exempt right now. In
Right.
fact, they are. And that's really what I was trying to bring to the attention. But if you would like to spend time actually, you know, digesting the fence ordinance, we can, and coming up with ways to improve it. You know, I'm for that. I just was, I would like to see it in the ordinance that they're actually exempt instead of these outside policies that you'll see have been, and I'm seeing over and over that have been granted with, and they're not being put into the ordinance essentially. So then we're having to administer them outside of the ordinance, which is not what you want to see with a land use policy.
Yeah, I agree. I think we probably do need to look at some of those instances and just make a decision whether or not we want to have fences literally abutting to the sidewalks.
I can think of
and-
many instances where it would be actually beneficial to the landowner for that too, though.
Right, I get it. I'm
That's
just
a
saying,
two-sided issue.
right, I'm just saying, make the decision, whether or not we want, concertina wire stretched across the front of our lawns.
Oh, no, we're not gonna have that, but I think we should, we can go to the big box stores' websites and pull up examples of decorative fences and
decorative,
put them
right.
in there
Yeah.
for the types of allowable fences.
Yep, and that's what I'm getting at. So, I'm not sure that I want a 6-foot chain link fence right on the sidewalk to make it look like, a POW camp on the other end.
Well, that brings up one of my other questions. And I agree that you don't want anything like that, but the height of the fence on the sidewalk.
Oh, that one should be just enough where somebody can, mailman can hand something over to the person on the other side of it.
Well,
No problem.
I believe it was 3 feet, but taking a walk around town, there are several.
There's some taller ones.
Yeah,
taller
there's
ones.
some that are 5-6 foot.
Yeah.
And you gotta look at how the age on some of those are too. Some of them have been there for a long time.
Well, some are brand new.
Brand new. Yeah, the
Walk
one
on.
on 3rd Street was just constructed.
So can I ask a question? I'm playing devil's advocate. I've also seen very large, thick, tall hedges in the front. What's the difference?
I would say nothing really. My case, my opinion.
Well, and there's probably no ordinance that applies to that, right?
More work. 'Cause you gotta.
Yeah, more. But my point is, I guess I don't know what the question about the ordinance is.
Well, I think part of it is aesthetics. What do we want our streets to look like? Do we want it to look like a demilitarized zone with like I said, chain link fences going straight across neighborhoods? That's part of it. No, but I do agree with the hedges. There's, I think that hedges should not be allowed to grow to the point where they obstruct access to the sidewalks.
True.
And there are instances of that in Manistee.
Like I said, I was just playing devil's advocate. I was curious what the difference was.
You do see
do that.
some ordinances where they're treated the same. Onekama Township treats many of those the same. So like on their waterfront yards, you're not allowed to have so far down. You'll see it, their front yards, they won't allow, they only allow them essentially on the side yards. You're not allowed to put them on the front or rear yards. So you basically, the shrubbery that you see, these overgrown hedges, or, you know, they might not be maintained the same or whatever. They do have restrictions built into them. If that's something you guys would like to do, maybe we need to look at amending the fence ordinance, because this was a lot more discussion than I thought was going to take place on it. Really, what I wanted to say was, hey, you know, it's not in the ordinance, but if we are looking at amendments, which I guess I was going to save this for later, but we are putting forth so many amendments currently. I think it might be wise to put together a master list of amendments and then have George review them at one time, and then be able to push them out to the public instead of piecemealing them together. And if you guys would like to discuss the fence ordinance, I can bring forth examples of different communities and what they look like with their fence ordinances in place. Like, so you kind of have to think about what you enjoy seeing. So, you know, if you go down, you know, do you like to go down Maple and see the fences that are decorative? And you also have walls that are decorative. You have landscaping that's decorative through there. But then you also have the chain link fence that it looks like somebody's going to replace there. And there's nothing in your ordinance to prevent that if that's something you don't want to see.
Right.
So, you know, it's really what you guys feels the master plan says to do. And if that's something that you guys wish to look at, we can start looking at fences and basically develop some policy off of that and add it to the master amendments list and pass it on to George for review.
Can I ask a question real quick? Why did we stop requiring permits for fences? Because when I put my fence up for my dog, most of the fence was already here, but I had to add to it. So I had to get a permit to add to it. And in that permit, I had to describe what the fence was going to look like to get it approved. And I'm just wondering, why did we stop doing the permits? Because it seems like the permit would take care of some of these problems.
My knowledge of it is Rob Carson. The fence requirements were removed back, I believe, in 2016 is when the ordinance was amended. And the reason I was given for that by Denise was both the workload for fences and the requirements of necessitating a survey once we permit, because you're talking about close to a property line. So if you have someone who wants to put a fence in and you're going to start requiring a permit, we're going to require surveys, which could be $1,000. And so the excess cost of that in removing the permit language from the city's ordinance for a requirement removes the liability of the city and places it as a civil issue between adjacent property owners if it goes over the property line.
Okay.
But I just want to forewarn you, if we do that, we are going to write into the ordinance. If we're going to do permits again, we're going to write into the ordinance that there is a requirement for a survey, so that when we are approving them, there are survey stakes in the ground so that we can see property lines, because we just can't do an effective job of approving fence permits if we don't know exactly where the property lines are.
Can I ask a question regarding that? Because I don't advocate for permits, but so it becomes if I heard you right, it becomes a civil issue. So if neighbors have some sort of dispute about property lines and they've got surveys, then they just take it to civil court, right?
That's exactly correct. Yep. If we the involvement of the city would be, if there's a permit, what basically is occurring is the city is authorizing placement of that fence through that permit on whatever location is agreed upon through the site plan that's included with the land use permit application. And if the permit is approved and the fence is placed over on the neighbor's property, that neighbor could then have case against the city for approving that permit.
Okay.
So I think that had a lot to do with it when Denise explained that to me a few years ago when they removed the requirements. Because when I lived in the city, I put a fence in that was 6 or 7 years ago and a permit was required.
Yeah, but mine,
Most that I put
mine
in
was
was not
too.
along
I've dealt with that at many other municipalities too, also on that, where I've gotten called in to survey the property line because of the dispute. Now, they didn't have any requirements on their permits for where the fence to be placed. Like you're saying, it becomes a civil suit. That's where me as a surveyor or some other surveyor gets called in to take that, and it goes into court action a lot of the time. And there starts to be major expenses on both parties involved. So most of the time, a person that's actually conscientious about putting their fence in is gonna try to stay back a little bit, but you're gonna get some yo-yo that's gonna try to infringe on it, and that's where the court system will come in.
Answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Last one, and this is kind of a goofy one, but if you put a berm in your yard, can you put a 6-foot fence in it?
Why do you need a fence if you have a 6-foot berm?
Not a 6-foot berm, but if you did a berm of 2 feet, let's say.
I've seen
And,
those.
and you put a 6-foot fence, is that legal?
So most ordinances say that you have to place the fence prior to fill, which I don't see in ours, but it basically, so like I could put 2 feet under my fence and I want an 8-foot fence. I'd put it all the way around with fill and, you know, basically have an 8-foot fence. That's a 6-foot fence measured from grade.
So do we have anything in the ordinance against a moat?
Don't give me ideas, please.
Gators? Can gators live in Michigan? I don't think so.
Well, actually,
No, they don't like
a lot of those berms come in for drainage control. A lot of it when people put berms in a lot. It'll be more drainage control than anything else.
Don't get
All
me
right.
started on drainage control.
Yeah, right. So that was just a dumb question by me.
No,
We'll go get you some gators, Mark.
There's one in the number 15 at Heathlands, so in the pond. But okay,
really?
let's move along. If everybody's done on fencing, we'll go to patios.
Yes.
Okay, so it was getting into this portion of it was, so a lot of times with patios and zoning ordinances, you'll see that they're exempt. They're kind of, you know, in the sidewalk range, as long as they're not violating like your maximum lot coverage for drainage, or they're not built within your setbacks or something like along those lines. And usually if they're under 200 square feet, they don't require a permit. So that was something I said, you know, hey, if you would like to, if a change was to be made, we recommend that the following language be added to Article 5, provisions, sections 502, subsection D, subsection 3. And it's shown on the next page as well of your packet, right where it would go. You can see under there, anywhere on this parcel that does not require a land use permit, flagpoles, hydrants, arbors, trees, plants, shrubs, subject to the provisions of section 513 pertaining to clear vision areas, sidewalks, and walkways. So it would go under there as E, patios built at grade, built no closer than 3 feet to the property line, not exceeding 200 square feet, and not exceeding the parcel's maximum lot coverage for the district in which it resides. So that's the language we came up with. If you guys are looking to add that into it, you could also at that point under F, add fences in there for not requiring a permit.
Just to satisfy my own ignorance, because I'm just thinking of patios, maybe I just don't know enough about them. Why couldn't you build a patio no closer than 3 feet to a property line? Is it drainage or something?
It's to ensure that people aren't, your setbacks actually are 3 feet for the most part within your districts on these for your like side and your rear. And
Sure.
So by doing that, you're basically keeping it out of the setback so you don't run into that fence problem that you talked about earlier. I mean, they're built,
Oh, with the fence. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
it's basically to keep it out of the setback requirement
Got it.
districts. Now, if you had a bigger setback, obviously that distance would be greater. It's
Mhm.
just you guys, for the most part, 3 feet on your accessory structures and such.
Okay.
Sidewalks and driveways tend to be exempt from those.
I've got a question on the 200 square feet. Now, say the person's got a huge, huge lot and they want to put in can we have in there where with a planning commission approval to go for a larger patio? That depending on the square footage of the lot?
They would just have to get a land use permit if they went over 200 square feet. So
Okay.
it would just, they currently have to. But we would just eliminate that under 200 square feet. So if you're under 200 square feet, you can put it in without one. If you're over it, then you would have to apply for a land use permit.
Okay.
And that's all I have on that, guys. So.
So
Thank you.
we're good with this being added?
Yes.
Yep, everything looks good.
All right. Okay, we'll move along. So that will be added.
All right, our next thing is we have an RRC requirement that has come down from the state to stay as a ready redevelopment community, that we have to define what a site plan review committee consists of and who is actually on that. Even though it's spelled out to an extent within our zoning ordinance, they want an actual definition of who could possibly take place in this. So it's basically an amendment to the zoning ordinance that adds this definition into it. I would put it on the master list to go before George for review. And then when all these they go through George and we kind of have enough of them, we'll call a meeting. And then try to have citizen review on all these at one time. That way we're not calling one every month. And then I think, right around 5 or 6 of these, which we're getting close to, we will pretty soon gonna have to call a meeting for these amendments.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer. I think this is exactly what we do. So I have no objections. I think it's the appropriate people that you've listed as part of that review board.
Yeah, it's just never been physically spelled out before.
Yeah.
We've been doing that. I don't know if we've had the city manager involved in any of them at all, but I know DPW and the planning and police and fire.
Yeah. And I think the city manager, certainly from an overview and review, is probably taking place, even if we haven't specifically addressed it.
From our experience, the city manager does sit in a lot of these review sessions.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Because I know previous ones I was on before you guys took over, that was when Denise was still there. The city manager never came into those meetings.
Why not?
He never did.
He just didn't do it.
He was
Not
right
that he
across the
was
hall, but
bored.
he never came in.
So he could have, but he just didn't.
Right.
Well, you don't necessarily have to be in the meeting. You could review the materials and sign off on it afterwards. Theoretically, you wouldn't have to necessarily be in the meeting itself, but I think it's probably appropriate for the city manager to be on that list.
He should be.
Well, we wouldn't want him to say something happened and he didn't know about it.
Yeah, exactly.
He should know what's going on in the community. So he should be involved in it.
Yep.
And if he doesn't put any input in, it's his own fault.
Exactly. So are we good with the recommendations on this?
Yes, I am.
I am.
Pam, Shelly,
Yes.
I know Mick and Bob are, and same here. So we'll run with that.
And I
Okay.
think if the city manager doesn't have anything to input onto it, that should be noted as well.
Yep.
Just,
It covers everything that way.
yes.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah, if somebody has no input, they should have put in there, they have no input, no matter which department it is, so it covers that.
Right. I think there needs to be some accountability. So to cover everything, you know, so if something happens and then they come back later on going, well, I didn't agree to this, and at least it's in writing that at that time, somebody didn't say something.
And I would think that as I would see it, the city manager would be the last approval on it before it left the office to come back to the planning commission.
Should be, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys suggesting a memo be sent or just like an official letterhead that they have no input, or even an email? Like what format do you
I don't think it has to be that formal. I just think that everyone needs to coordinate and sign off on it, including the city. So all, you know, those four people need to be signature, you know, initialing off on that document as it comes forward.
Yeah, just a little thing saying, okay, city fire department, input is received, police department received, city manager, no input.
Right.
Just a simple checkbox thing.
Right,
with them signing
exactly.
it.
Yep.
That's good.
Concur, non-concur, or concur with comment, or non-concur with comment.
Yep. And I'm good with an email because those are legally binding as well.
Yep.
It's in writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just fill in the blanks on a checklist that they gotta say,
Yeah.
yes, we did, and no, we didn't.
We don't want to make this more difficult than it already is, just so that it complies and that it makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we're good on this. Anybody has anything else? Nothing? Okay. We're gonna move to old business. Item up is short-term rentals.
Okay, so Commissioner Memberto had recommended this Village of Pentwater short-term rental ordinance. And at this time, we did not have city guidelines as to, or city council's recommendation to move forward with short-term rentals. When I discussed this with the city manager, I had asked him about short-term rentals and, you know, moving forward with that. He had said that he thought it was a little premature, and so I waited city council's recommendation to move forward with this. I had talked to Mick about it, and that's kind of where we're at. I just kind of gave you this for review because I wanted to put it in your hands, but we haven't moved forward from our last meeting other than this because we haven't had guidance from city council to do so.
This is Mick. I talked to Thad and I asked that it be put on the next planning working group. So it'll be on the agenda for the next working group for city council.
Does city council wish the planning commission to not work on short-term rentals because they are planning on devising a short-term rental ordinance?
No, it's the discussion that we talked about. In other words, you know, do we want it to be a codified ordinance, or do we want it to be a, you know, part of planning and zoning? Is going to be part of the discussion on the next work session.
Your work session. So
That's
that
the
is
best
what?
I could. The best I could do. It was when I talked to Thad. It was really too late to add another item to the last city council, and it really is more of a discussion item that fits better into the working group. So hopefully this next Tuesday we'll be able to give you some specifics. I read the Pentwater, and for, you know, a few minor things, I think it's probably something very close to what we would be looking for in Manistee.
Yeah, we planned on using it as a baseline for you guys to tweak after review. We thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's not radical. It gives most property owners an opportunity to participate within safe and reasonable criteria. So, there may be a couple of things that we want to add or detract, but overall, I thought it was a really good a baseline document and a good discussion point for City Council.
No, it's a good document. I went through it a couple times, and I like what they have in it. I think it hits all the points.
Yep, and Pittwater is probably, maybe not by population, but proportionately probably more short-term rentals than Manistee.
Probably. And when I'd looked through quite a few, and this was, I think, the least intrusive of
Right.
the ordinances. And, I don't have an opinion yet on whether or not I believe that they should be regulated, but I thought, okay, I know we have some concerns from neighbors. I know people were talking about too many parking spots and that kind of thing, but I don't know that we need to create law to stop people from doing that. But just like you said, this seemed to be the most reasonable that I could find.
We just gotta have to come up with something that keeps some of these fly-by-night rental places, have something where you can have a little teeth to go after them. I don't have a problem with most of the people that normally are doing it. It's these fly-by-night somewhere, who knows, God knows where they're from. Oh, I got this place, I'm renting it, don't care. That's the ones we gotta find a way to put a teeth in for those type of instances.
I mean,
Yeah, I think when you have absent owners.
Yep. And again, we have an obligation to the people who would be renting to have a foot in, and some muscle to make sure that people aren't being taken advantage of,
Sure.
and being told, oh yeah, you can, this will hold 12 people, and they come in and the place is 700 square feet.
Yeah, true.
So I do like the idea of how it's designed. There may be, again, some instances, I think we probably have to address areas where you have pre-existing criteria, which one takes precedence.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I thought it was a pretty solid document.
Except for some spelling errors that annoyed me, but yes.
It's gonna just need a little tweaking here and there. It's just gonna take time to digest it and think about it a bit.
I would, I have not given a Commissioner Memberto the documentation that we presented back in January about short-term rentals within the city, that presentation. I think, for one, that the city desperately needs to regulate short-term rentals. And if you look around most northern Michigan communities, they are doing so. And it's because of the housing shortage that is taking place, and the rents that are increasing and pushing out working class people from being able to afford to live in our community. And if the young people,
I understand. Okay.
that
I can understand. You don't want to end up like San Jose, California, where nobody can afford to live.
right. And
Exactly.
Place to live.
Well, and I think the other side that we ran into is during the pandemic, the city had absolutely no control over people coming up from northern Michigan to hang out here during the pandemic. And we did have a lot of our short-term rentals were occupied from people downstate because they could come and live it out up here. And
They were not supposed to be doing that.
they were not supposed to, but we had no control over it one way or another.
I know, and that's why I want some control over short-term
Yeah.
rentals.
So having having an ordinance, then we have something to go by. But having it completely uncontrolled, I think, is certainly not the appropriate venue for the city.
And Mike, this is Shelly. If that's something you could email to me, I'd be really interested in it, because to tell you the truth, I wasn't even aware. I mean, other than a few Airbnbs that I've seen pop up, wasn't even aware that we really even had short-term rentals. So I'd be interested in learning anything I can about it.
Yep. How many do we have that we know of when we did the search?
So, I mean, I can get into it more, but it was during the off season, and even pulling those numbers, I mean, you've seen a dramatic, it wasn't a real representation of numbers. And even with that, within the last 3 years, you've seen a 286% increase within the city, not counting ones that are listed double on websites. And there's hundreds of them out there.
So it was like 600?
I don't think it was that many. I want to say it was.
Okay.
I want to say it was.
Hey, Mike, does that include Harbor Village?
97 is what I want to say.
Mike,
97.
does that include Harbor Village?
Most of them are in Harbor Village, but you got to also realize that when I took that data, I tried to leave a disclaimer on there because that data was pulled, I think, in December or January or maybe November. So it's the off season here. So you have to realize in the summertime, if you look at the graph that's included, you guys shoot way up in June and July. And as part of the people I've been talking to for enforcement, they're going to include a presentation where they pull every listing from like all the major websites and then basically tell you about it. But without city council's approval to move forward with that, I've had to tell them to wait. So.
Because some of these people that are renting things out are targeting certain areas of the country to these people that come here for a short term. That some of those, we have no idea they're doing it.
I just did a search on 4th of July weekend for stays in Manistee and got 137.
Yeah.
It's several hundred.
And that was on one website?
One Airbnb.
Yep. And so you got Turnkey, you got, I mean, there's hundreds of them. So that's one thing that's really nice about this enforcement place. They actually have algorithms that go out and pull from all the major websites and will tell you the listings that are actually taking place within the city. I mean, I don't want to, I want them to talk about it because they're the experts, but at the same time, without direction, if it's something that the city wants to do at a city council level, I don't, I can coordinate that for them, but at the same time, I want to make sure that it's something that they wish to do.
So from your experience, is it more likely that there's a codified ordinance from the city, or that it becomes a zoning and permitting issue? What's the most prevalent?
I mean, yeah, I've seen it both ways. I don't want to say that one's better than the other. Codified is, I mean, you could have it as a standalone, but you could put it in zoning. It really depends on your enforcement and how you want to do it. With having the city police, most communities don't have that. They have where they're using the sheriffs and they have agreements in place, but they're not, to come out and do short-term rental enforcement. So it depends on really your enforcement capabilities on it. So, and the amount of time and resources that you want to put towards it. So yeah, a lot of them that are smaller, they throw it in their zoning. And one of them, when they're a bigger entity or they have more capacity, you see it as standalone, in my experience. Now,
yeah, let me add something. One thing, Rob, Carson here. One thing that we got to consider if you place it in a zoning ordinance is, when are these enforcement issues going to take place? If it's in a zoning ordinance, the citations are typically delivered by a public safety officer, but they are written and initially made contact through the zoning administrator. So if we're talking short-term rentals, the violations that are going to occur are going to be noise, if there's limits on the amount of people that can be staying there, stuff like that, that's going to occur either in the evening or over the weekend. And I'll speak for Mike. Mike's not going to be working on the weekend doing enforcement. So neither am I. So my recommendation is to maintain it in a codified ordinance.
Okay.
We
And
could
that's
align
what
the
I was getting
zoning
at.
ordinance with it so that it makes it a permitted use in those specific districts. If it gets limited to districts or whatever, we could waive a land use permit and just direct everybody to the codified ordinance. I'm just concerned that when a call comes in for a short-term rental, and if it's covered under zoning and the call comes in here past 5 o'clock on a Friday and before 8:30 a.m. on Monday, we're not going to get it.
And they're gone by then. The people are gone by then. And they go,
Exactly.
"We can do it."
And they probably, and again, smart people will know that pretty quick.
You're right. They'll know that no one's going to be able to enforce it, and so exactly.
If they know that the law enforcement's going to come and enforce it immediately, that puts a whole different spin on it for what they're going to do.
Right. And the Pittwater one is a codified ordinance, if I read that correctly.
Yeah, it's in their code of ordinances.
Yep, sorry, yes, it is. Sorry, guys. Yep.
Yeah.
Just trying to unmute myself.
So can you send that to Thad? I don't know if you've already sent it, but if not, could you send that to Thad and per my suggestion, have that included in the packet for the upcoming city council work session?
Yep, I can do that. I will ensure that they get it.
That and the previous one that you presented.
Trying to think which one that was. Was that the
Which
Oneka?
one? I don't remember one.
I think it was the Onekama, Mike.
Was it Onekamas? I can't remember. I've got it somewhere. I didn't pull out all those other documents, but you sent us another sample of an ordinance. I don't know if it was a codified ordinance, but you gave us another example of.
Yeah, I will be. So with Onekamas, I believe theirs is a codified ordinance as well, but their enforcement within it is basically appointing an enforcement officer within the township, and they basically rely on. They're trying out to see how it works. If they actually need it to enforce, then there is provisions built into it that allow for them to recoup fees and such like that. But it's essentially a good neighbor policy.
Right. And theirs it hasn't even started yet.
No.
But actually, you did that. You did the slideshow.
Right.
So send them the slideshow and then give them a copy of that Pittwater. And I think that would be enough for us to have as discussion points.
Okay, yeah. We think the Pentwater is a good starting point. Obviously, there's some things that we need to tailor towards us and fix. But yeah, we do think it's a good starting point, and I will include that slideshow for them as well.
And any suggestions that you would have as well, any suggestions as far as a fix or things that you see are lacking in that document, that would be helpful as well.
All right.
Does that make sense to the rest of the planning?
It does.
Yes, it does, Meg. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. If we're complete, amendments to zoning ordinance, master list, and when to call a public hearing.
All right, so we are starting to rapidly, I kind of implemented this master list just for the simple fact of we're talking about so many amendments coming through that putting them together on one document just seems to make sense. That way, when we put them in the paper, we can list them at the same time instead of individually and start spending more and more money on, basically calling for printing and stuff like that. Now, I don't think we've done anything so far that would warrant us going out and amending, an amendment to any of these zoning districts that, and alerting the people that we're doing this, which we don't have to under amendments, but a lot of times is it good. Like we did that in Onakama for the special residential area when they, somebody came through for a text amendment to allow for, I'm sorry, it wasn't special and unique residential, it was AG2, and it was to allow for wedding barns. It's not a requirement that we sent out the mailing to that district, but we did because it was the right thing to do. So we haven't, I don't think, have anything on that, but at the same time, we are getting quite a list together, and we need to start having that discussion on when we want to call the hearing to get the public's input on this and start passing these.
Okay.
More things we could put on the list is for that one shot, like you're saying. I think it'd be better off. Otherwise, like you said, we don't want to have a million meetings for every little odds and ends. If we can put 8 or 9 things together at one meeting, it'll save a lot of problems.
Right. I do warn you though, if we do so, and there's some unpopular ones, it will be a large meeting. So with the whole COVID thing, I've been hesitant to bring this up, but we are starting to get a list together. If there is other amendments that you guys that we're working towards, maybe we should wait to call that, or when we do call it, look towards other venues to hold the meetings for these, even if we don't have people turn out, or it is something that could cause an issue. I don't see anything in our amendments so far that are causing any, but we really haven't delved into anything too crazy. So
Well, just so we understand, we don't want to create a meeting that's going to take 3 or 4 hours to get ourselves through as well. So let's, kind of address, 2 hours as kind of the max that we want to put ourselves out as far as going through a public hearing or a public meeting with, just the length of discussion.
I don't want to have a meeting that is that long.
Yeah,
2 hours should be max.
We've had them that long.
Exactly.
That's
And
the
that,
problem.
so we just have to address it. If it's going to be something that we know, then we, again, we may have to limit it to 2, items if they're going to be controversial with a lot of discussion. And we may want to split them up so we don't have all the controversial ones at the same meeting.
And flip side, we can get all the ones that we know are going to be cookie cutter type, put them all together and go bang, bang, bang through them.
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I'll try to devise a list and I'll break it up for you guys next time. And I'll be like, okay, here's what we've devised so far. What do you want to do? Where do you want to add them? And then we'll make a decision and then we'll call the meeting.
Yeah.
Right now, with what we're doing so far, and if short-term rentals come off our plate or if they get put on, that's kind of the big one right there, aside from the sign ordinance. So without those kind of, without direction on those, we're kind of just in a holding pattern.
Well, in the sign ordinance, since you brought it up, the recommendation was that we have a working group. So how would that be established? Would that be a working group with something at city council, or is that something that would be done through zoning and planning?
Well, we're still waiting on city council to address if they would like us to work on a new sign ordinance.
Okay. Right.
So we're still on a holding pattern on that.
Okay.
Right. Next is lower story dwellings.
So that's just added to the master list, and I was kind of just trying to show you guys what would get on there, and it was just more of to demonstrate what that would look like with the amendments on there. It's not an actual talking point.
All right.
We've already discussed it, and it was
Okay.
what you guys said with removing the other requirements on there for the short-term rental and making the person live on the within the building on that as well.
Have we gotten any input from the DDA on that?
The DDA supported that. Initially, they thought they had passed a amendment to allow for it, but their amendment was written in such a way, and it wasn't in the proper places that it would have never allowed for such activity, number one. And number two, it wasn't really done correctly to do what they wanted to do. It was back when that was in the last meeting where I explained that the multiple use and how it wasn't really appropriate, and we had to rewrite it to allow for the uses within our downtown. It basically, we had to rewrite it to look at the same as that upper story dwelling, as opposed to like a multiple 3-person living on the bottom story dwelling. It just really would not have worked.
Could you send what you sent to us to the DDA and get their concurrence?
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem at all.
Yeah, because I think that's exactly what we were discussing and looking at, and I'd be shocked if there was any opposition. But if the DDA doesn't object, then I don't see that there's going to be any uproar from City Council either.
Right.
Next, dumpsters, pads, screening, and enforcement.
All right, so you guys had a lot of complaints about dumpsters and pads and screening in the area, and people saying that they're grandfathered in and that you can't make me put my dumpster behind a screening or on a pad. The city attorney came out with an opinion on it after much discussion between me and him about it. And he said that, and I'm just going to read it. After considering the matter further, it is my opinion that the issue of dumpster location, etc., is a regulatory matter not involving a building or structure and would not be subject to a defense of legal non-conforming use. Consequently, we can proceed with enforcement through the zoning ordinance. George Saylor.
Okay, good. Now we're talking about permanent dumpsters, though. We're not talking about somebody renovating their home and having one dropped off in their
no,
their
those are
driveway.
called temporary, and they're very clearly outlined within it. These would be the dumpsters that every commercial business has, which brings me to my next point. You nearly have everybody violating this within the city. So
Yeah.
if you really want to enforce this, which it seems like a lot of people do, one thing we're going to need to do is talk about how we're going to enforce it. I've come with a couple of suggestions. One would be to first do a write-up in the paper that, hey, we're looking to enforce on these, to try to get some, first of all, to get the conversation going and to let people know that this is something that's being looked at, as well as see if we can get some volunteer, cleanup on the people that own businesses in the city, before we start coming through. Then
so this is, okay, that's why I was confused. This is company or the large dumpsters?
The ones where the truck comes, picks them up with the forks every week.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, there's nearly everybody's violating this, but, if I say we put something in the paper that just says, hey, the city's looking at this, we could talk to the reporters and see if they're willing to do a story on it. And then we need to develop a plan of how to do it. And one of the problems with doing it is, I really think that we need to do like a district by district and move through the districts throughout the city through enforcement that way, as opposed to allowing, as complaints come in, to decide who we're going to enforce with. It's, that way we can say, hey, we're working through it. there's due process in it, as opposed to, the always pointing a finger, why are you picking on me when my neighbor's doing it right there?
Right.
So my recommendation is, since George thinks that we can do this, I think that we might, there's going to be a lot of heat from this as far as, from the community, if we don't at least put it out that we're going after this and have the city council willing to support this. So even though it's a flagrant violation throughout the city, we need to make sure that they're on board with supporting this, because you look around the city, it's everywhere.
Oh,
You look at the existing ordinance that's in the book, and even from 2017, it was amended where they're supposed to have a dumpster in an enclosure, but there is no time frame. That's something that's got to be added as an amendment somewhere in there. Because right now, there's no time saying when they got to have that fence or concrete. It just says they've got to have it.
Well, usually through enforcement, I set a time frame of when they have to have it, but I would really appreciate, if we're going to start doing this, that we have the city council's support, and we have a set time frame that we give everyone, as well as everybody agrees on that time frame, because you're basically telling people, yeah, this is enforcement, it's for health and safety that you're supposed to have this, but there's going to be people that are going to push back on this. So I just have to make sure that everybody's on board with this before we go to enforce on this.
If we're gonna go with time frames on it, we also, if you're gonna talk about going through parts of a city at a time, we're gonna need to look at what time of the year we're going through that part of the city, because it may be unrealistic for them to do that in that time frame of the year. So we may have to adjust some time frames for them to get the stuff done, depending on the way the weather is around here.
Right.
Would compliance be, how much of a financial burden would it be for these businesses to comply?
That's more with what I'm concerned with, is that
especially right now.
Come back and say, I can't afford to do these.
Concrete's not cheap right now. It is not cheap.
Yeah, so I have a concern about the timing more than anything. If it's something that, like you said, you put an ad in the paper, or you put a story in the paper, or you put public notice out, you talk about something coming in the next, 12 to 18 months, at least people have time to plan for it. And, but I just don't know what the financial burden is. And I think I'd need to know more about that.
Do you have an idea what it costs for a standard enclosure for a dumpster?
I do not. I know the city is putting some in the DDA, so I'm pretty sure
and that's why I was going to ask. If you check with Jeff McCullough, he should have a reasonable idea of what we're talking about from a cost perspective, because they're putting in the ones on the downtown area.
But as a municipality, you're getting a little bit break on price on the concrete than the business owner would get. So you got to look at the differences on that. You got to look at that financial end of it too. You can't say, oh, the city's doing it for this much, but you're
I'm just saying, just so I have an idea. I have no idea. We're talking about 5,000 or 50,000, right? I just want to get an idea of a ballpark of what we're looking at.
Are we going to require what type of screening is used?
I think there was a couple different mentions they had, as long as it was something that couldn't be seen through it can be lockable.
Yeah, because you guys are talking about concrete, which is very expensive right now. I understand, but a wooden screen of some type for at least temporarily.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the pad. The pad would have to be concrete, because you can't. It's going to have to be concrete.
Right.
They don't like the asphalt ones because those dumpsters sink into it and the garbage sticks to it. You can't clean it up very well.
Okay, I understand about the pads, but I was wondering about the screening, because I've seen, wooden and concrete and concrete blocks, and I'm just wondering, are we going to require a certain type if we're going to do this? I'm all for it, because I look at a dumpster every single day because there's one across the street from me.
I think it's just got to be something you can't see through.
Right. Yeah.
Give me 1 second, guys. I'm actually pulling it up.
Hey, Mick,
Yes.
how many dumpsters did the city approve?
I think there's 3 locations, and I think one of them, so it'd be 3, 5, it's about 7 dumpsters, 7 or 8 dumpsters, but I think there's 3 located in one, and then there's 2 with 2 each.
They're talking about they're only approved 2 locations, not the number of dumpsters in the
Three
location.
locations.
How come everything I saw in the paper showed 2? They didn't show a third one. They only showed 2 in the paper when they put.
Okay, I thought we had 3 locations, but maybe we're only doing 2. But one of them has 3 dumpsters in it.
Okay, so that's a rather large one, because what I
Yes.
found is the city has approved spending 65 grand on dumpsters, corrals,
Well, and the corrals and the pads.
because the corrals are going up in the parking lot right across the street from City Hall, aren't they?
Well, there's
Oh, they're going by
different
Jack Fry.
locations.
But for the downtown district, aren't they going there?
Yeah, but there's 3 different for downtown. I thought there was 3 locations. I could be wrong, but I thought we had 3 locations for dumpsters on the downtown.
On your screen, you guys will see dumpster enclosures, and that is the entirety of it right there.
Yep.
So as you can see, it does, this section is not intended to require the screening of any dumpster used on a temporary basis during construction, remodeling, or demolition of a building.
Right, the only thing that's lacking is the time frame for them to have to get a enclosure and dumpster pad put in.
Well, I
That's the
think,
only thing I see it's
How old
lacking
is
in
this?
that.
How old is this?
2017 was the,
So I would say
Amendment
that
I
they've
saw.
had plenty of time. So my suggestion is that we basically send this ordinance as an attachment with a letter, basically stating that, we are going to be seeking full compliance with this. Please contact the planning office.
but there's no time limit listed in there.
Well,
That-
but
and
what I'm
financial
saying is-
thing
Amendment.
come into play. That's the thing. You've got no specific time frame for something to be completed by. It may take, you could have a building that's taking 2 to 3 years to build, and you're telling them now you got to have that dumpster pad immediately.
well, it doesn't matter on a construction basis. Section E, this section is not intended to require the screening of any dumpster used on a temporary basis.
Right, I understand that one, but the business that's going to have one, they may
think-
not have the money to put the one in immediately for a permanent one.
As I read it, I would say the presumption of law would say if you have to be in compliance when you have that dumpster dropped off. And
Not the way I
what I
read it.
would, and I would further suggest that the dumpster company is in non-compliance for dropping off a dumpster if it doesn't meet the criteria for the city. And that they should be subject to penalty and violation.
And then you'd have to get some kind of ordinance for that, for them to be enforced for that, for the
Right.
dumpster company
Right.
dropping it. There isn't
Would
one.
that include temporary ones, like for home renovation and things?
No,
No.
that's what, there is an exemption for that in that ordinance.
Okay.
But like I said, if you want to enforce it, you make the people who own the dumpster responsible as well. They're not going to drop that dumpster off if they know they're going to get a ticket.
Yeah, that's true.
There's nothing saying they're going to get a ticket in that
No,
ordinance.
but that's what I'm saying. That would be something that I would look at including, is having it associated with the provider as well as the recipient. If you want to put some muscle in it, you do it in both directions. If the guy from Federal says, I'm gonna have to pick my dumpster up and I'm not gonna be able to drop it off anymore because I'm in non-compliance, how long do you think it's gonna take that owner to be able to figure out that he's gotta do something?
Well, that's where the owner's gonna go to one of the other companies that pick stuff up, and you'll get their dumpster in for a while. Then they'll just go from refuge
Yeah,
company
but-
to refuge company. There's more of
Well-
in the area than you think.
There's only about 3 in Manistee County that I'm aware of.
And I've
And
seen quite a
if you
few.
find them, and like I said, if the requirement is that they are fiduciarily responsible for putting a dumpster where it doesn't belong, then they'll all comply.
We'd hope they would.
I would think, yeah, exactly. They're,
And it all depends how big, deep the pockets of that company are too, to
Right.
fight it. Because they can start bringing a lot of litigation on stuff too, if we don't do it the right way.
well, and that's what I'm saying, is we just need to look at that as being another option for compliance, is to look at making sure that the dumpster company has a stake in the game.
I foresee if something like that happens, where this dumpster company has to have a stake in the game, you're gonna see them not bringing dumpsters, and the company's starting to put bags and bags of garbage in those enclosures, which it's an enclosed area. It doesn't say, it says the area, it doesn't say it has to be a dumpster in there.
Well, no, what I'm saying, but the real issue is that they don't have an enclosed area. You just have a dumpster out behind a building.
Oh yeah, we know that.
Yeah, so if they have an enclosure, they should have a dumpster.
Yeah, then there's no
That's
issue
what
with
it's designed
with
for.
the dumpster being delivered and empty. So it's just a suggestion that we look at, in a compliance situation, that we tackle it from both the owner of the building and the company who's providing the service, both to have a stake in the game of doing it the way we expect it to be done.
I can see that, like, from a perspective of they keep dropping them off, that they're in violation as well, and they get a letter as well.
Yeah.
With the potential to get a ticket afterwards. I'm sure if you sent out a couple letters, it would stop,
Right.
and they'd start paying attention. The real issue is we need to develop a plan on how to do this. Willy-nilly enforcement won't work on this. It's too widespread. We need to develop a plan to go through this, and I mean, we can, but I need to make sure that before we go and we tell the paper that in 18 months we would like to see all enclosures, or whatever, 24 months, we'd like to see all enclosures within the city, all dumpsters and enclosures. That when this comes out, that we have the support of council and the planning commission to do so. Now, I just want to make sure that, going forward, that they support this and that before we go and make this move, that they really would like us to do so. Because the last thing I want to do is go out there and start enforcing this, because the city attorney feels that we have the ability to do so, and then find out the city council doesn't approve of us doing so, or they feel we came down too heavy-handed, or whatever it may be. So before we do this, I would really like city council's approval to do this, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Okay.
Before I devise a plan, Mick, is to sit there and say, hey, could we get something from city council that says, hey, go do this? Because really, we asked this question initially because we wanted to know if they wanted to put it in a codified ordinance. And then they came back and said, no, we think it should be enforced through zoning. So with saying that, could we get them to say they approve of what we're doing with this enforcement?
Okay. Yep. And
That's what the letter was for too. So we
Yeah,
have
and
a
to
track
me-
record. We have a road.
with
Go
all
ahead,
the
Nick.
issues that Manistee has and the city council has addressed with blight, this falls into the blight category as far as I'm concerned. This is just another form of blight.
I'm not disagreeing, and there's other issues that, like from other commissions that I work with that are moving forward with requesting the city to enforce the anti-blight ordinance. Now they're doing so in the same manner because they're kind of fed up with not getting the results that they want, and they're more restrictive on power than we are. But they would like that support as well, is to know that
Yep.
city council does support that. And I mean, it is the timing of it. I know that people complain that we don't go after blight. You see it all over the place. Oh, they never enforce it. But now that we are, and it's not like we suddenly all of a sudden 4 months ago decided we were going to go after blight, or since COVID, but the timing of it doesn't seem that great to the public. But we've been working on this for 6 months to a year. It's not like we suddenly came up that, hey, we're going to start doing this. It's just, I think we do need to take that into consideration. And that's why I'm saying that I would really like the support of city council on this.
Okay. So I got a question. So let's make an assumption that we have a business that is got a dumpster and it's got several complaints. So from planning and enforcement, what do you do?
I go out and I investigate, is it an actual complaint? So I'll walk out there, look at it, review the ordinance. Yes, it appears to be a complaint. Once I've determined that I think it's a complaint, we move forward with, usually I talk to them depending on the severity. So if we are talking about the Diner 31 issue, I thought it was in the city right away, which there's requirements on a general policy that's outside of zoning that says that they have to carry liability insurance. So if somebody was hurt on that property, the city would be open to being sued. So I put a stop order immediately on that and said, no, you can't operate this here, because I didn't want to open the city up to basically being sued. If that wasn't the case and it turned out not to be, I rescinded the order. But they and then we went through zoning the proper way where I'm investigating it, but that's another matter. But yeah. Normally I would just go and talk to the property owner and be like, hey, can you please clean this up? And I'd give them a certain amount of time to do so. Maybe it's 10 days, maybe it's 30. And then I'd come back and check on if they haven't acted on it and it is a zoning violation, it's not, an extreme one. Then I would then set a certified letter that says you will act upon this by a certain amount of time. If they fail you to do so, I turn it over to the police for ticketing.
Okay. So have we done that with any dumpsters in town?
No. And that's why, because this policy from George, everybody was like, oh, I'm grandfathered in. And everybody legitimately thinks they're grandfathered in. So that's why I'm like, we kind of need to do an educational piece on this as well, where we reach out to the paper and say, you're not grandfathered in, this is health and safety. We are looking to enforce this, but I want to make sure before we do so that everybody agrees that we should do this, because the last thing I want is not everybody agreeing and somebody being like, well, we shouldn't be doing this, this is wrong, we're putting, look at what we're, and basically working against what we're trying to do, which is clean up the city.
Okay. So
with this, we would like direction from city council then, right, Mike?
Basically, I would like them to say they support this.
Okay.
City council or the city office?
Well, council runs the city.
Right.
City manager takes direction from the city council. So I would say, this is me personally,
Yep.
that it would come from city council.
Okay, so this
I
needs to
agree.
be something else put on as an agenda item.
Yeah, I can request that as well.
Would you? Yeah, that would help. Because it can't just all come from me, because I'm on both councils. But I don't see this as not getting city council support. I can't imagine anyone that would not be in favor of us, being compliant, making sure that the businesses are in compliant with a 2017 requirement for them to basically, fairly and reasonably maintain the trash that they have on their property.
I realize exactly what you're saying, Mick, and I completely agree. I just I would feel comfortable because right now, if we don't have city council's approval, it will appear to the public that the planning commission basically decided that they were going to enforce on this. And then if it gets hot, like in people coming out in force, we can say, listen, city council supports this. We were trying to get rid of blight within the area. We support this. We're all on the same footing, instead of if certain people, realize that this is actually going to be a hot button item, and then they change their mind. We have it in writing that they supported it.
Well, and I do like the idea that we start off with, sending something to the public and to the violators that we know of, basically saying, look, this is an ordinance. It may not have been enforced in the past, but we're giving you notice that this is something that we are going to vigorously support in the future. So please start working your plans and prevent us from having to take any kind of, litigation against you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anybody have any comments? Anyone else?
I agree.
Okay. Pam?
I agree. I think it's more than just a violators issue, though. I think the entire, all of the public should be made aware that this is, and I think we'd get a lot more support when there are those few that are going to push back against it. I think the whole community needs to know about it. Because right now, I don't think most of them know or care that this is going on.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you're the neighbor, if you're in one of those areas where you have the dumpster across the street from you, yeah, it makes a difference. Yeah.
I mean, I have a clean dumpster. They take good care of it, but it is out in the open and it's locked, and there's no problems with it other than the fact that it's just ugly to look at,
Right.
And plus it's right on the sidewalk too, so. But and I feel for the people that have the really messy, crappy ones, but I think a lot of the community doesn't realize that it's going on because they just don't see it. So I think if we could let everybody know that we're going to be enforcing this, I think we'll get some more support for it.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and you could take a picture or two of the real serious violators, and not necessarily put the name of the business in it, but just kind of show what we're addressing.
Sure.
Right.
And if it comes along, it's going to get worse.
I would like to put this out to the commissioners, and it's something I did when I was on council. I would go around and take pictures of violations and send them in. So if you're out, everybody has a phone, you can take a picture of it, text the address, you can send it to me, email it to me, and I'll get it on to Mike. So let's do that.
One thing on some of these spots, the business that's there is not the landowner. So how can you hold them responsible and not the building owner for that? Because the renter, he does not know what the owner of the building is responsible for all the time. So I don't see where you can hold the business inside that's renting the place responsible.
We never list, or we try not to list the renter or the business operator as the violator on letters. We always list out the parcel owner. That way you also get more traction with that way, because the fines aren't going towards the business, they're going towards that parcel owner, and then they react more quickly.
So we just got to make sure we're not unjustly going after a business owner and not the property owner. We just got to make sure we ensure that, like you said, you're doing.
So,
But both should be aware of what's going on so that the business owner can get after the parcel owner to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, typically I go in and talk to the business that's operating. And a lot of times you can present them with the paperwork and they can ensure it gets to them. We also mail it out. You know, if it's an initial conversation, we always try to do it with an initial conversation of, hey, do you have the owner's, number? And then you have a conversation with them. We're looking at doing this. 95% of the time that business owner will call you and find out what's going on. They're not typically, they want to know what's going on because they know that enforcement can cost them money. So,
Yes.
right. Okay. So if you're out and about and you so choose to, you can, pop a picture, address and such. So we're good on this?
I just have one other question.
Sure.
If city council does support this and they give us their support in whatever form that might be, a memo, whatever, if they would volunteer to be part of the story and offer their comments, or even commissioners on this board would offer their comments for the paper, if we did a write-up, I think that would be awesome because it would show like, hey, this isn't just me from the planning commission or the planning department here in the county. It's the city supports this as well. So there's not that appearance that the planning department at the county is trying to dictate enforcement on all the citizens in the city. It's no, we stand unified and this is something we want real change. So if we do a story, I would really appreciate volunteers to speak with the media as well.
Anybody would like to do that?
Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
I would. I would. Okay. Well, you have your answer, Mike.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next one is side ordinance, model ordinance.
Okay. So I did hear Tom's comments earlier. So a lot of this was put together with Kyle and me, and I apologize if we got that wrong. No, it doesn't go on deaf ears. This model ordinance, I know Tom wasn't there, and this was just it's supposed to be a starting point. All those questions haven't been answered. We haven't moved forward on it whatsoever. This was just kind of giving something to review, and we're going to work off of this. I actually spoke out and said, you're Mr. Amor is he has a plethora of knowledge, and he should be included in the work sessions. Saying that, we haven't moved forward with it at all. So I hope you did not get that thought or anything like that, and we haven't been directed to by city council. So this was supposed to be a blank slate and moving forward. Supposed to be calling a work session, and yeah, that's really what I have to say about that.
Okay. Anybody, any comments?
I have a real quick question. Does the sign ordinance also pertain to other outside lighting on a business, or is it just the sign?
There's supposed to be cutoff light fixtures throughout the city, and they get approved through when the site plan comes in, and they're supposed to not have lumens bleed off into other parcels.
Yeah, this is Rob here. Those are separate standards outside of the sign section. They're in the general provisions similar to signs, but they pertain specifically to lighting.
Okay.
So in drafting these portions, the only portions that actually tie in lighting are those that speak directly to how the sign is lit, whether it's internal, external, has flashing, strobing, that sort of thing.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, this is Mick Szymanski. Somebody who's not an expert on this particular element. but I can be pretty visually astute. Is there a city that we would like to model Manistee after? And if so, can we get a copy of their sign ordinance?
I mean, it's really up to you guys. I mean, it depends. I mean, as I've talked to Tom and other, I mean, it depends if you want to be a dark sky, as Tom has put it, or not. A lot of these ordinance that we brought forward, which we've liked, they have elements in them that are built into them that you might not wish. It's really what you guys find appealing. My experience is that we wanted to go towards a mounted a ground sign and get away from pole signs, and that conflict didn't take place as far as what drove the wanting to change. But you guys tell us what you want. That was part of the questions I put in there, is to find out not only how you want to approach this, but what you really want. Because yeah, I can make a sign ordinance up, and I can model it off of certain communities, but at the end of the day, it's you guys who live within this community that are going to dictate what it is. And that's what I was really trying to get across, is breaking it up into areas and saying, what do we want for this area, and like, what do we envision here? So if we do get the guidance to move forward on the sign ordinance, those are the questions I'm going to ask, is really, okay, what do you envision this area? Like breaking the city up in these work sessions and saying, what do we want here? What do we want here? And then, leaning on expertise of individual to sit there and say, from your side, from your aspect, what is an appropriate sign for this mile per hour within this area? I think that's appropriate, but at the same time, it shouldn't be developed by us staff, just sitting around, when you guys are the ones that, are living in the community and really know what you want. So, I mean, if I developed a sign ordinance, it would look completely different than Tom's. It would look completely different than your guys's probably. But at the end of the day, we should be giving input and feedback, but not dictating what it should look like.
We've still got to look at keeping like character of certain areas. Okay, this sign will work in this area, but not this part of town. So we've got almost divided into different areas in town for the ordinances on it, just because of the character of that area.
Yep. Well, and again, what I was trying to get at is that, could we get like 3, an example of this is this type of sign ordinance. You talk about dark sky. I'm not an expert. I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
Versus, what, I do know what when you address pole signs, I get it. I know what those are. But I don't know from a an aesthetic point, those A, B, and C's. If we could get an idea and some photo shots of this is what A looks like, this is what B looks like, and this is what C looks like, which one do we want Manistee to look like? Then I think from my perspective, I can be a better advocate for one or the other. A lot of the things when you're talking about, lumens and how it's lit and all of those things, honestly, I don't know enough science to be able to be an advocate one way or another.
Right. And this is going to take time to educate not only, but to also decide on basically what you guys want for each district. So, maybe, it really goes back to, guys, if we can get the city council to say, work on this, I will put together an educational piece there that basically can break down these different things, show you guys some examples. And then maybe what we'll do is, the sign ordinance isn't going to be rewritten in, I don't envision it being rewritten in, 6 months. I don't. It's if we have an educational piece in it and we're really trying to redo the whole city, it's going to take probably longer than that. So, just being honest with you, if you guys, really want to do this and city council approves it, then yeah, we can look at doing that, but it's going to be a long process.
Yeah, this will be it could be anywhere from 12 to 18 months before it even gets close enough to go back for an approval, depending on how involved we have to get with it.
Yeah. And just my suggestion, I would start with the US 31 corridor.
Right. I mean, I'm going to start with an educational piece, to be honest with you, but I can tailor it towards the US 31 corridor. And then we can look at other areas like historical districts, what some of these things mean as far as like, and just kind of get basic, areas down. But when we break down the city in different areas and what you guys want, like, I'm going to be leaning heavily on you to tell me what you want, not for me to determine it. So just know that I'm going to be asking a lot of questions and providing just input for when you guys ask questions. So,
right. But I go back to when we were working on the Green Mile, and we went into signage quite a bit, and I thought we made a lot of positive decisions on what we thought would be appropriate.
Yeah.
How does that blend into what the new sign ordinance would look like?
Yeah, that's appropriate for that area, but would that be appropriate down by, say, Family Fair?
Right.
Not necessarily. We're going to need to look at these areas to see what's appropriate for what area. It may have to be broke up into different chunks through there to be appropriate for those areas.
Right. And what you would see is just basically what you guys kind of have with your districts, like a nice flow chart that breaks it all out for applicants. I think that's really needed. There's other, as far as definitions go, there could be a lot more definitions added that we've ran into from an enforcement aspect. Now, as far as breaking up the districts, yeah, I think that's exactly what we need to do if you guys want to attack this. But again, before we go looking at signage and angering anybody that we're making these changes, those same questions that you're asking yourself about dumpsters and enclosures, you need to ask yourself about this. Like I mean, everybody would like to see change immediately, but
Signs are expensive.
exactly. And
Very. We buy them regularly at work, and I'm astounded how much they cost.
And they're only going up.
so
Right.
keep that in mind as well. And once city council tells us to go for it, I will get with you guys with some districts that I think are appropriate, and then we'll start looking at those districts. So, and if you want to start with the 31 corridor, I will make note of that to put something together for that. So,
Right. I think, I don't know everybody's feelings, but the 31 corridor to me would be the most important one. So,
Yeah, we got to watch how we do that 31 corridor, because one size is not going to fit the entire corridor.
Well, and we clearly couldn't regulate the paint colors.
Yeah, that got put out on that. I remember seeing that in a law enforcement thing.
Mm-hmm.
okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this topic?
No, none.
None?
No.
Not right
We'll move
now.
along. It's 9:01, so we'll move along. Public comments, communication. If there's anyone still with us from the public, if you'd like to make a comment, please do so, name and address, and you have up to 5 minutes.
Tom, do you have comment?
I do. My name is Tom Amore at 432 4th Street. I just want to tag on to the sign ordinance conversation. We're all in favor of aesthetics. Part of my big disagreement on which model code to start with is the Signage Research Foundation one that was used in conjunction with the American Planning Association, the International Sign Association, the Signage Research Foundation, being moderated by the University of Cincinnati, starts with the purpose of a code. And in all of the discussions about districts and aesthetics and definitions, most ordinances I look at don't take enough time to look at what is the purpose of the sign. And from the perspective of community and businesses. And if we get that nailed down first, then we can find common ground. But sometimes that is left till last. And another point is, when we come up with aesthetics, we got to do it in a legal way. And some of the definitions have to be done in a legal way. And unlike plumbing and electrical codes and building codes, signage has an element of speech in it. And we have to be careful about, even though it's commercial speech, there are protections and there are Supreme Court precedents even in the state of Michigan. So when we start making a definition about a non-conforming sign and when a non-conforming sign must be removed, it's no different than that 140-year-old carriage house next to the fence. You can't just take that asset away from a business owner. So I think we need to address some of those things at the beginning and the rest will fall into place. I think it's a wrong approach to start with a definition and start in a district without defining the importance of signs. So I would suggest let's look at that Signage Research Foundation model code. It's a very good place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right. Anyone else? Nothing? Okay. Correspondence. See, we have a letter from Tracy Linderman, letter in support of the lower story dwelling amendment.
Right. It's dear commissioners, please reclassify my primary residence parcel 5151-452-704-23 located at 308 River Street from commercial property to mixed use property. Thank you for your consideration, Tracy Linderman.
Okay.
Which building is that downtown?
That's a Hokinson building.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, it is already mixed use. Is that not correct?
I don't believe it's classified as that.
Not classified, but in reality.
In reality, I believe it is, but I don't believe it's actually zoned that way. So his bank is giving him quite a runaround.
So, but this is what we're also asking for in the previous description of properties in River Street, correct?
This is part of the lower story dwelling amendment that we're proposing. He would like, as part of it, that not only that get approved, but for it to be, once it is approved, moved to a mixed use property, which it would at that time become, because there is residential and commercial space mixing essentially.
Okay.
But it's not recognized as a use on the lower story dwelling. So therefore he can't get a suitable mortgage for that property.
So if we approve the First Amendment, we don't have to act on this amendment or recommendation, correct?
If you did the lower story dwelling amendment, this would, I believe, resolve his issue, because it would become illegal with our zoning ordinance use, and then it changes the building to a mixed use.
Okay.
He does have to meet all the requirements of that, you know, that we've set up the separate entrance and all that. And if he's not found to do that, then, you know, he'd be in violation. But yes, I think it would resolve his issue.
Okay. Because otherwise, you know, again, you know, there's how many businesses on River Street and how many of them would be classified as mixed use, or how many are already, I don't know.
I can't answer that because I don't know the residential of every building down there. I don't know that off the top of my head. I know that, yes, there are some that are operating with an upper story dwelling that then becomes mixed use when they, you know, start renting it out as a residence or a short-term rental or whatever they're doing. However, if it remains a commercial, it still remains commercial. So
And not mixed use.
that is correct. And the problem with Tracy, I believe, and Rob will jump in, but is that we do not have a legal way for him to make his building, because he's living on the bottom floor, a mixed use building, because our code does not allow for residential residences to take place on the bottom floor.
That's correct.
So that's my point. We have to change the first thing that we discussed before we can address anything that he's requesting.
If we change the first thing we talked about, it would automatically fix his issue.
Okay.
Any questions or comments on this from anyone? No? Okay, move along. Staff reports, 100 square foot or less accessory buildings.
So I have to comment on this. There is a rumor or something out there that in the city that if you have 100 square foot or less accessory building, you do not require a land use permit. That is not true. So my question was, is that something that you guys would like to move forward with? Because there is a lot of people that assume that is a valid thing. And I don't know if that was something that was intended, but it is not currently the way of the world as far as the zoning goes, but it is a huge rumor out there. Nonetheless, I get asked it all the time. Well,
Does that mean like a shed?
Yeah,
It's a 10 by 10 shed.
So a 10 by 10 shed, you need a land use permit for?
Right. And the issue that I have with it is, okay, I've been living in, the city for many, many years, let's say, and I'm just sick of my lawnmower being in my garage or whatever it may be, or I want more room. I then have to uncap my taxes to put in a 10 by 10 shed to store my lawnmower. And, from my standpoint, I don't know if that's what you guys want to do. So, it's really on you but it is something that is a rampant rumor out there as far as that.
Well, and we could put an exemption for something like, under 10 by 10 or under 12 by 12 or whatever could be exempt, right?
That is correct. But what I'm saying, it doesn't exist currently. So you have a bunch of structures that should be permitted that aren't. And then there's other issues with it as far as people assume that because this exists, that it is on multiple buildings. So if I have a 10 by 10, I didn't have to get a land use permit. I got another 10 by 10. Oh, I didn't have to get a land use permit for that.
Yeah, you'd see people putting 10 by 10 by 10 by 10 all the way across their yard.
Well, and you could limit the number too, though, based on the size of the property.
Yeah.
Or you could just say a single 10 by 10 accessory structure, or there's many ways.
For 5,000 feet or something.
There's many ways of doing this, but it currently does not exist.
Okay. My personal opinion is that if this is a temporary storage facility, it's one thing. But if I'm building something, a 10 by 10, and then I'm going to start renting it out as a 1 bedroom, no.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
yes.
So we have to make sure that we're talking about temporary facilities that are storage only. I think I would agree and support that, but it would have to be very specific to the point that we're looking at something that's being constructed to put a
not for
lawn
habitation
or a
Not building the granny houses on it.
exactly.
Not for habitation, not for right.
So even though we have this 10 by 10 exemption that we put in there, I just want the council members here to go, or commissioners to go down Kosciuszko. Just drive
There's
down.
a lot of them.
Please drive down there and tell me.
I know. I've seen it.
Besides the blight, so.
They're all over.
So if we grant a exemption for this and we actually put it in the zoning ordinance, we still have many buildings out there that they exceed 10 by 10. They're not on foundations. There's many different issues on this that then do we enforce on? So then we're back to that. And I mean, they're not, I mean, I don't want to live, if I'm living next to you, I don't want to live next to somebody who's got 2 10 by 10 or 2 12 by 12s or whatever it may be, storage facilities, because they're cheaper than building a garage, and they just, you know, rot away. And then, you know, over 30 years, they finally fall to dust, you know.
No, yeah,
I get it.
I get it. We've got some in our neighborhoods as well. So I think it needs, you know, it needs to be crafted in such a way that we allow people to be able to put a small facility in their backyard to kind of be their garden shed without it becoming something other than that.
And something in there saying that it's got to be kept in decent shape.
Yeah.
And as also on that, like what kind of foundation, I mean, we can develop this language over time. We can put something forth and then you guys can develop it and we can send it to George. But I mean, foundations are very important when you talk about this as far as permanent structures go too. Or even like, you know, you don't have to require a fee, but you can still permit these things as well. So that's another way of doing it to ensure that they're meeting setbacks and such, and that they are getting at least recorded on, you know, at some point. So you don't have, oh, I've had these 3 storage structures since before you guys passed that amendment. I'm grandfathered in. Well, there's no grandfather because it never existed. So,
Right.
Well, when I did mine back in 2012, I took out an 8x8 storage shed. We purchased land to our west, this parcel lot, and I put a 10 by 12 unit in with a base, with a foundation of limestone. So it's laying on limestone. And what I was told is if there was a cement pad underneath, I needed a permit. Other than that, I did not need a permit.
As you're gonna see a lot of those that have just the plywood base underneath them.
Right.
so I've looked for a garden shed amendment. There's one that exists in Onekama Township. They give you 144 square feet or less. But I cannot find it in this zoning ordinance. I've looked, and basically you guys allow for accessory building in most of your districts, saying as in singular, not plural. So you're allowed an unattached garage or one shed. So that would be exactly what I'm talking about, where it's just rampant throughout the city that you're allowed these sizes of structures, and it doesn't exist currently.
Personally, I would like to see a no fee, but to cover everyone's behind is have a permit, issue a permit for it. I know it's a lot more work on your end, but it helps. Just like our setbacks, some people don't know their setbacks, so they put it close to the property line, and that causes issues too. So,
But it need to be much of a chargeable permit, because just to make people have to go through the paperwork to get it.
I mean, you guys only charge for 200 square feet or less right now, a $25 permit.
Right.
So,
Okay.
I mean, it's not crazy
It's not
that
excessive,
I'm
no.
calling it. It's just, there is the fact that people think that this is a thing that exists within the ordinance.
so see, I didn't know about the $25. So $25 is, you know, a couple quarters. Quick 5 minutes at the casino. So,
And
No, it isn't in the financial analyst there. We don't win that often.
by the time you get the materials for the shed, that $25 is nothing.
right. Or a trip down to Manistee Beverage. So,
You guys, you see a lot of these with those Amish sheds that are coming out now, that people are throwing them up all over, and they're bigger than that 10 by 10. But
Yep.
So I just wanted to let you guys know that, you know, try to put that to bed a little bit by addressing it here, that's not something that really exists. So
okay. All right.
And a lot of those are pretty good quality built too.
I know they are. They're big.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other comments on this one?
None.
None? Okay. Thank you. And member discussion, we'll start with Bob. Anything?
Nothing tonight. We're moving along.
All right, Mick?
Nothing for me.
Okay, Shelly?
None for me, thank you.
All right, thank you. Pam?
No, none.
Nothing? Okay. The only thing I have is this goes back to December of 2019 when we issued permit for the Wild Bill Smoke Shop. And this goes back to the sign. So we gave him a 6-month extension to clean up the sign, make necessary repairs, and as of today, it hasn't been done.
No, the bottom section of that sign's not had anything done to it.
Right. So my question, Mike and Rob, Nancy, is what do we have and what can we do? Is there anything?
Well, I'm letting Rob weigh in.
Tied to his special use permit, you can, or we can revoke the permit. I would feel most comfortable doing that with a motion from the planning commission, though.
Okay, with that, would we fire a shot over the bow, per se?
That's exactly what I would suggest. I would go ahead and make a motion that includes a provision that staff send a notice of non-compliance and a 30 days basically to come into compliance, and the threatening language of the special use permit will be revoked, which pretty much eliminates all use of that property for what it's being used for currently.
Mark,
Yes.
while we're discussing this business, that actually was the reason why I was asking about the outside lighting on the building. It's the same business that I was wondering if that lighting was approved or not in their site plan, because it's pretty obnoxious, and I feel for the people who live across the street from that building.
Unfortunately, it meets the sign ordinance in terms of lighting because it's not flashing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the sign though. I'm talking about the lighting on the building itself. And I understand that the special use permit was for the sign, but I still have a question about the lights on the building, if that was part of their site plan to have those things.
Well, unfortunately, the ordinance isn't very stringent on lighting outside of like parking lot lighting and having to be full cutoff fixtures. It doesn't take to task lighting on buildings. I feel the same way that you do, that there's an excessive amount of neon illumination coming off that building.
I guess he's probably counting, there's at least 3 lights that I guess he's counting as parking lot lights, but I mean, it's brighter than the airport, for Pete's sakes. I was just curious. Never mind. Go on.
No, I mean, that is a good point, Pam. I mean, it's something that, should we down the road or sometime look at? What are the feelings of everyone?
Yeah, a certain illumination level acts in there.
It is kind of obnoxious, I have to say. So.
Which building are we talking? I don't know which building you're talking
This
about.
is the tobacco shop on 7th and Cypress.
Yeah. Just
Wild
drive,
Bill.
Oh, the new place, yeah.
the new place. Yeah. If you drive past it in the dark, it's actually very distracting.
Looks
It
like
is,
script
yeah.
time,
Right.
so.
I think
When
they
I'm
want
driving to
people
work in
know
the
they're
morning, it's
there.
distracting.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, they want people to know they're there.
Bob, you don't work, so.
Not till August anyway. I'm blaming the person in Lansing for that problem.
Okay. I mean, do we want as a group to address this, to review it? Is that what we want to do? I mean, the lighting on the buildings.
Have any of the neighbors complained?
I don't know. And I was just wondering if somebody had, if, you know, they may not know who to complain to. I mean, if I was living across the street, I sure as heck would be complaining to somebody. I don't know if they've complained or not. Maybe they don't mind. It's just, you know, if we're going to be putting up, you know, if we're going to be making a sign ordinance, especially for our 31 corridor, I can't see where the outside lighting on that building is going to fit in with anything that we would want in this town.
And if you look at the Wild Bill's Smoke Shop in Ludington, it's set back off the highway or off the.
Yeah,
It's a good 100 feet off the road.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's in a true commercial district where we have a mixed use in ours.
Right. And even the lighting on that one is not as bad as this one is, though.
It's the same lighting. It's just from the distance.
Just from a distance. Okay.
It's just the exact same lighting.
Okay.
So, question to Mike and Rob and Nancy is something that we can go further on?
Well, I think the first thing is yes, we need to send them a notice that they were supposed to, you know, address that sign and they have not completed that work. So that's number one. Asking, you know, we could ask them, you know, saying that, you know, we've had several comments and concerns about the lighting. And is it possible for them to either tone it down or turn it off at a reasonable time of night?
Now you got to remember that that's a business that's renting from that place, so there's
Right.
two different entities you're going to deal with right then.
Right. Yeah, I know, but I mean, you know, you can always ask.
Right.
Even
You don't have
We
to
might get easy
comply.
compliance from one, but not the other.
Right. But the sign, that's basically we have something that they said that they were going to fix,
right.
and we can get them to do that. The second part with the lighting, we can, at this point, I think we can only ask. But lighting in general for businesses probably needs to be something that we look at as we look at the signage as well.
Sure.
So
I
with
agree.
that said, is there a motion to send a letter with a 30-day notice?
I motion.
Motion by Bob, second
I'll second.
by Pam. Any comments? None?
That's just concerning the sign, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
just the
Yes.
sign. Yeah, just the
Just
sign.
the sign repair.
Yeah, baby steps.
Nancy, could you take roll, please?
Commissioner Slawinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Szymanski,
Yes.
Commissioner Manberto,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiner,
Yes.
Chair Whitliff.
Yes. Thank you. And now for part two. Coming out of ink. The lighting, how do we attack that?
I just don't know what his site plan said, because I don't think I ever saw it. I'm sure the guys have it somewhere. And I just, even if he could just direct it downward more rather than out.
I'd like to see how much lumens that sign is putting out to see how bright it is.
I'm not
Maybe
talking about
there's
the sign. Yeah, I'm not talking about the sign right now. I'm talking about.
the building itself, to see how many lumens is coming off the building.
Right.
You know, maybe having to be have to be dimmed down. It's just so we got a base to work off of to see how many lumens are there. To
Yeah.
See how outrageous it is, if it fits within their site plan.
That sounds fine with me. Yeah, if we can find that out, that would be great.
Okay, is that something that can be done, Mike or Rob?
Well, we don't have a lumen indicator.
You need a
We
lumen
have to
meter.
check with like the BPW to see if they have one. But we got to remember that this went through a special use permit process, and remember back to the meetings that took place and the individual that came there and how upset he was.
I remember.
Yeah, he's the owner of the building.
You know, he went through the whole gambit of saying that, you know, our permit fees are outrageous. No one requires this type of stuff. And then we went and actually, he said, none of this happens in Ludington area. And so we actually called Ludington, we called Hamlin Township, called a couple other townships, found out that our permit fees were right in line, that our standards were actually very similar.
Yeah.
So he was pretty much lying to you at that point in that meeting. But we got to remember that the planning commission did not hold him to some recommended standards that staff recommended. We recommended increases in parking. We recommended changes to signing, and that none of that was captured in the motion by the planning commission when it was made. So I just want to reiterate that and remind everybody that that's what occurred with that special use permit. So I have a feeling when we dig into that permit, look at that language, we're not going to have any teeth in there.
Okay.
The only thing I think we would have is if they had a specific lumens listed in their site plan, and if they're in violation of that, that'd be the only thing we'd have something to stand on.
So here's the issue. You guys approved a special use permit for the property.
Not for the business.
Not for the business coming in. And then the sign permit that the business presented met the requirements of the sign ordinance.
Right.
So what you're talking is apples and oranges. You're talking a special use permit, but you can enforce on the sign for that the gentleman has still not done. But the lumens are still meeting. Like, he could take that sign off, go to somewhere else in the city, put it right up, and it would meet the requirements.
So that was why I was going back. I don't know what we can do other than to send a letter saying that, you know, we've had several people complain and comment about the excessive light coming from that building. Is there any way that they can tone it down to be a good citizen?
Yeah, I mean, I could go talk to the individual and the owner.
Yeah.
They could simply say no, and that's fine.
They
We can do
can.
nothing.
They can.
That's where we're at. I mean, it's basically
Right.
we go, we ask, but the current sign ordinance allowed them to put that there.
Sure.
And that could be, if you guys don't like that, I believe that's the LEDs on a backlit. That is that what you're talking about? The one on the sign?
No, right around the windows and everything there.
Around the windows in the building itself.
Okay.
Yeah, there are 3 huge lights on the building itself that are, I assume he's using it, he's going to say it's for the parking lot, but it's pretty much directed outward. Even if he would just direct the lights down rather than out into the street.
Right.
And a lot of the ones on the windows are extremely bright.
They are too, but I can live with the neon ones in the windows. It's the one that are distracting drivers that I'm concerned with.
Yeah, it's bright. I've been through there.
Yeah.
It may just be a matter, he may have to put hoods on the lights or something.
That would work.
Yep.
Just something to make it go down instead of out.
Put a sunshade on it.
And
We can request it, but
I know.
Right. And that's all I'm saying is let's be gentler, kinder, and see if, again, they may have no issues. They may not really realize that they're causing the issues that they are. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt and hope for the best. And if not, then as we work towards sign ordinances, well, then we'll have to go back and address them as an example of why we need it.
Good point. Okay.
And they might be realistically to be amenable to, okay, we'll put hood
That's
lights
my
on.
hope.
Hoods.
Again, we bent over backwards to give them the ability to use that property because they've been there for so many years. I would hope that they would be amenable to support the wishes of the community at large. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I had. Any other comments from the commissioners?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Nancy, Mike, and Rob for tonight, and Tom Amor for staying with us, and each commissioner. With that, I'd like to take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second? John?
Second.
All right,
Report.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Everybody take care.